I spent 3 years building a business plan. My brother took it to our father, got $80,000 in funding, and launched it as his own. Then he told everyone I was just jealous of his success. 3 years of my life. Every detail, every number, every contact. He took it all, launched it with our father's money, and called me bitter when I told the truth. My name is Marcus Webb. I am 36 years old, and I watched my brother build his future out of my work. Not inspired by my work, not similar to my work, not a coincidence. My work, my supplier contacts, my pricing model, my projected client list, my delivery logistics, my 3 years of industry research compiled into a single detailed plan that I shared with him in confidence and that he took to our father 2 weeks later and presented as his own. He got $80,000 in startup funding. He got a business. He got to be the family success story. And I got to be the brother who couldn't handle watching someone else succeed. I want to tell you what actually happened, not the version that gets told at family dinners, not the version Derek tells when people ask how he built his company. The real version, the one with timestamps and email trails and a decade of my own industry experience quietly stripped and repackaged under my brother's name. My name is Marcus Webb, and this is my story. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia, middle-class family. Dad, Raymond, worked in commercial real estate. Mom, Patricia, was a school administrator. 2 boys, me and Derek, 5 years younger. Raymond was a provider in the truest sense of the word. He worked hard. He kept the lights on. He kept us fed and clothed and in a house with a good roof in a good neighborhood with good schools. He coached my little league team for 2 years when I was 9 and 10, and he showed up to every one of Derek's middle school basketball games with a folding chair and a thermos of coffee, and he was, by any reasonable measure, a present father. But his real attention, his real investment, went toward potential. He liked initiative. He liked boldness. He liked the son who walked into the room with an idea and demanded to be heard. That was rarely me. I was the quiet one, the studious one. I did my work carefully and thoroughly and without a lot of noise. I got good grades because I put in the hours, not because anything came easily to me. I was methodical, deliberate. I read the fine print before I signed anything. I checked my work twice before I turned it in. When I didn't know something, I admitted it and went and learned it rather than performing confidence I didn't have. My father respected these qualities in the abstract. He would tell people I was reliable, that I was solid, that I was the kind of person you could count on. But reliability and solidity are not the things that make a father's eyes light up at the dinner table. They are the things that make a father nod with quiet approval. Nodding is not the same as the lit-up eyes. I learned that early. Derek was the one who came home with grand announcements. At 12, he was going to be a professional basketball player. At 15, he was going to start a clothing line. At 17, he was going to be a music producer. Each new vision was presented with absolute conviction, with energy, with the kind of charisma that makes people around you want to believe even when the specifics don't hold up. Raymond listened to all of it with a kind of proud attention he never quite directed at my steady, unremarkable progress. None of Derek's grand visions materialized. The basketball career ended when he didn't make the high school varsity team. The clothing line was 3 sketches in a notebook. The music production was a year of making beats in his bedroom before he moved on. But Raymond never seemed to hold the gap between Derek's pronouncements and his follow-through against him. The boldness itself was the thing Raymond valued. The reaching, the announcement of ambition. I noticed. Of course I noticed. But I made my peace with it. I was not Derek. I was not going to be Derek. And that was fine. What I understood, even as a teenager, was that the two of us were wired differently. Derek thought out loud. He announced first and figured out the details later, or didn't. I built in silence and only spoke when the thing was ready. Neither approach is wrong. They are just different. The problem is that one of them is visible and one of them is not. And in a family that measured effort by what they could see, I was mostly invisible. I am not telling this to ask for sympathy about my childhood. I had a good childhood by any honest measure. I am telling it because it is the context. Because understanding what happened later requires understanding what the Webb family rewarded and what it overlooked. It requires understanding that Derek learned very early that boldness was valued and that thoroughness was taken for granted, and that I learned very early to do my best work alone, in private, without fanfare, because that was simply the way I was built. Those habits served me well for 32 years. And then they made me vulnerable in a way I never anticipated. I went to Georgia State, studied business administration, graduated in 3.5 years by taking summer classes, got a job in restaurant supply right out of college, a distribution company that worked with mid-size restaurant groups across the Southeast. Entry level, loading dock to start, then inside sales, then account management, then regional manager by the time I was 31. 10 years in that industry. I knew it. I knew it the way you know something when you have lived inside it for a decade. The suppliers, the margins, the seasonal rhythms, the pressure points, the gaps in the market where a smarter operation could move faster and cheaper than the established players. I knew exactly where the opportunity was. Specialty food distribution, not mass commodity goods, not the big box restaurant chains. The independent restaurants, the chef-driven concepts, the farm-to-table places that were growing all across the Southeast and that had real purchasing power but were being badly underserved by distributors who couldn't move fast enough or source narrowly enough to meet what they actually needed. I saw it clearly. I had been seeing it for years. Specialty food distribution, not mass commodity goods, not the large restaurant chains. The independent restaurants, the chef-driven concepts, the farm-to-table places growing across the Southeast that had real purchasing power but were being badly underserved by distributors too slow and too standardized to meet what they actually needed. I had watched this gap from the inside for years. I had been the account manager on the wrong side of it, representing a company that was too large, too slow, too standardized to give these clients what they actually wanted. I had lost accounts I had built from scratch to smaller regional operators who could move nimbly. I had watched chef owners go through 3 or 4 distributors in a year, never satisfied, always searching for someone who understood that they needed 12 cases of a specific heirloom tomato variety on a Thursday morning, and that close enough was not good enough. I knew the customer. I knew the pain point. I knew exactly what the right company would look like. In the spring of my 32nd year, I started writing it down. It was not a casual exercise. I want you to understand the scope of what I built over those 3 years. I started with the market research, existing distributors in the region, their client lists, their pricing structures, their delivery windows, their customer satisfaction ratings, which I gathered from industry contacts and from conversations with restaurant owners I had built relationships with over a decade. I mapped the gap. I quantified it. I drove to restaurants on weekends and asked if I could sit down with the purchasing manager or the chef owner for 20 minutes. Most of them said yes because I had been in the industry long enough that my name carried some weight, and because what I was asking about, what they wished their distributor could do differently, was a question they were happy to answer. I sat across from chefs in the back of dining rooms before service, and I took notes and I listened. I filled 3 legal pads with those conversations over 18 months. Then I built the financial model. Revenue projections across 3 years. Operating costs, vehicle costs, cold storage costs, labor costs for drivers, a dispatcher, and an office manager in year 1, scaling up in years 2 and 3 as volume grew. Gross margin targets by product category. Break-even timeline. I had worked with enough profit and loss statements in my career to know how to make numbers that were honest rather than optimistic. I built 2 versions, a base case and a conservative case. In both versions, the business was profitable by month 19. Then I built the supplier side. I had relationships, real ones, built over a decade of showing up in person, of paying invoices on time, of calling a farm owner personally when there was a problem rather than routing it through a customer service department. Farms and specialty producers across Georgia, South Carolina, North Carolina, and Tennessee whose owners knew my name and trusted my word. I documented every one of them. Contact names, product categories, lead times, minimum orders, seasonal availability windows, which ones had cold storage capacity and which ones needed just-in-time pickup. I cross-referenced them against the restaurant client list so I could show exactly which supplier would serve which account. Then I built the client pipeline. Restaurant groups I had existing relationships with. Chef owners I had worked with at my current job who had told me, more than once, that they wished someone would do exactly what I was describing. Names, contacts, estimated monthly spend, likelihood of conversion, and what specifically they had said they were looking for. The pipeline had 43 names on it, 43 restaurant accounts, with contact information, purchasing patterns, and documented pain points from their current distributor relationships. Then I built the operational plan. Delivery routes mapped by geography and delivery window requirements. Vehicle specifications, insulated box trucks, what size, what refrigeration unit, lease versus purchase analysis. Software for order management and route optimization. I had tested 3 software platforms with trial accounts and included a comparison. Staffing structure and compensation models for the first 18 months. I spent 3 years on this plan. Not full-time. I was still working my regional manager job during all of it, running a sales territory, managing accounts, hitting quarterly numbers. I built this in the evenings. On weekends. On vacation days, I took a loan in my apartment with my laptop and my notebooks and a pot of coffee and the particular satisfaction of doing work that was completely mine, that no one was measuring or evaluating or waiting on. When it was ready, I was proud of it, not in a showy way, in the quiet way that comes from knowing you have done something thoroughly and well. I sat with it for a while before sharing it with anyone. I was not ready to approach investors yet. I wanted one more set of eyes on it first. Someone I trusted. Someone who would ask hard questions and help me find the weak points before I put it in front of a bank or an investor who would find them for me. I called Derek. I chose Derek for reasons that seemed solid at the time. He had spent several years in sales at a logistics technology company. He understood the industry well enough to follow the conversation. He was smart, genuinely smart in a quick, lateral way that was different from my more systematic thinking, and I thought that combination could be useful. And he was my brother. I trusted him with the thing I had been building for 3 years because he was my brother and we had shared a childhood and a last name and the particular bond that comes from having the same father, for better and worse. He came over on a Saturday afternoon in February. I made lunch. We sat at my kitchen table and I walked him through the plan. All of it. The market analysis, the financial model, the supplier relationships, the client pipeline, the operational structure. I shared my screen. I showed him the spreadsheets. I talked him through every section. He listened. He was engaged. He asked questions, good ones, actually. He asked about the cold storage cost assumptions. He asked about the minimum viable volume to break even in year 1. He asked which supplier relationships were the most secure. I answered everything. I was glad he was engaged. It felt like a real conversation between 2 brothers who were finally talking about something serious. At the end, he leaned back in his chair and said, "Man, Marcus, this is really solid. I think this could actually work." "You think?" I said. "I really do. You've got the relationships. You've got the market knowledge. This isn't some idea somebody had in the shower. This is real." I felt good. I felt like sharing it had been the right call. "Don't say anything yet," I told him. "I'm not ready to move on this publicly. I've got some decisions to make about timing and financing before I talk to anyone." "Of course," he said. "This is your thing. I get it." He left around 4 in the afternoon. I cleaned up the lunch dishes and felt, for the first time in a while, like I was close to something real. 2 weeks later, my mother called me. I remember the exact moment. I was in my car in a parking garage, about to go into a client meeting. My phone rang, and it was Mom, and I almost let it go to voicemail. I picked up. "Marcus," she said. Her voice had a careful quality I recognized. The tone she used when she was about to tell me something I was not going to like, and she was figuring out how to make it land gently. "What happened? Did you know Derek went to your father?" "What do you mean?" "About a business. He came to your father last week and asked for money to start a food distribution company. He had a presentation, all kinds of documents. Your father gave him the money." I sat in my car in that parking garage for a long time without saying anything. "Marcus." "How much?" I said. $80,000. I had been preparing to ask for a small business loan from a bank. I had good credit. I had a solid plan. I had thought the financing would take months to arrange. My brother had walked into our father's living room with my plan and walked out with $80,000 in 2 weeks. "Does Dad know it was my plan?" I asked. "I don't know what Derek told him," my mother said quietly. I canceled my client meeting. I went home. I sat at my kitchen table, the same table where I had walked Derek through everything 2 weeks earlier. and I opened my laptop and I looked at the plan I had spent 3 years building. Then I called Derek. He answered on the third ring. Hey, he said, like nothing was unusual, like it was any other Tuesday. Tell me what you did, I said. A pause. Then, I don't know what you're talking about. Derek, Mom told me. You went to Dad with the plan. My plan. The one I walked you through at my kitchen table 2 weeks ago. Another pause. Longer this time. It's not like that, he said. Then tell me what it's like. I took the concept and ran with it. I did my own research. I added my own ideas. What supplier contacts did you use, Derek? Silence. What pricing model did you use? Silence. What client names did you put in the presentation? Marcus. Those names came from me. Those suppliers came from 10 years of my relationships. That pricing model came from my spreadsheet. You didn't add ideas to my plan. You took my plan. You weren't moving on it, he said. His voice shifted then. Something defensive and entitled came into it. You've been sitting on this thing for years. I saw an opportunity and I moved. That's what entrepreneurs do. Ideas don't belong to anyone. I just executed it. I have thought about that sentence many times since. Ideas don't belong to anyone. I just executed it. It is a sentence designed to sound like wisdom, like something you'd read in a business book. But what it actually means is, I took what was yours and I'm going to tell myself a story that makes that okay. You executed my contacts, I said. You executed my financial model. You executed my supplier relationships. That's not execution, Derek. That's theft. He hung up. I sat with the phone in my hand for a while after that. The words he had used stayed with me. Ideas don't belong to anyone. I just executed it. He had said it with a kind of smooth confidence, the way people say things they have been rehearsing, which meant he had anticipated this conversation, which meant he had known, from the moment he walked out of my apartment on that Saturday afternoon in February, that I would eventually call him and say what I was saying. He had prepared an answer. He had prepared a frame. That prepared answer was the thing I kept returning to in the weeks after. Not the theft itself. The preparation. The fact that he had stood in my apartment and listened to me walk through 3 years of my work, and somewhere in that listening he had made a decision, and the decision included planning what he would say when I found out. He had looked at what I built, and he had thought about whether he could take it, and he had decided yes. And then he had thought about what he would say when the moment came. And the answer he arrived at was, ideas don't belong to anyone. Derek is not stupid. He is, in fact, quite intelligent in his lateral, quick-read way. He knew that answer would not hold up to any serious scrutiny. He knew I had the documentation. He knew the supplier emails existed. He knew the timestamps were there. He was not counting on the argument to win in a court. He was counting on it being the thing he said to me in the moment, the frame he established, so that when I told other people what had happened, there would be a version already in circulation where Derek was someone who had seized on an opportunity rather than someone who had taken his brother's work. He was managing the narrative before it existed. That is what I did not anticipate. I had built a detailed, thorough, extensively documented business plan. I had thought about suppliers and clients and logistics and margins and software and staffing. I had not thought about narrative management. I had not thought about the story that would be told. And Derek, who had been telling stories about himself his entire life, had thought about nothing else. That is the part of this I have thought about the most, not because it excuses anything, but because it explains the precision with which the situation unfolded. He did not stumble into taking my plan. He decided to, prepared the framing, presented to our father, and was ready for the conversation with me before I even knew there was anything to have a conversation about. I have spent a long time being angry about the theft. I spent less time, at first, being angry about the calculation. But the calculation is the harder thing. The calculation tells me something about my brother I cannot unknow. He chose this, deliberately, with preparation. That is what I sat with in my apartment after I hung up the phone. I did not call ahead. I drove to the house I grew up in on a Saturday morning, and I knocked on the door, and when Raymond answered, I said I needed to sit down with him. He let me in. We sat in the living room, the same room I had sat in 1,000 times, with the same furniture that had been there since I was in high school, the wingback chairs Raymond had always preferred, the bookshelf with the family photos. I was in one of those photos. Derek was in several of them. I laid out everything. I had the original files on my laptop, timestamped, going back 3 years. I had my emails with suppliers, emails in which I had discussed volume projections and delivery logistics and product sourcing under my own name, dated months, and in some cases years before Derek's company existed. I had the date on every document. I had the email thread with one of my closest supplier contacts where I had specifically mentioned, in writing, that I was developing a business plan and would be following up when I was ready to discuss terms. That email was sent 14 months before Derek walked into this house. I walked my father through all of it. Raymond listened. He sat with his hands folded, and he looked at what I was showing him, and he listened to the whole thing without interrupting. When I finished, there was a silence. Then he said, "Derek came to me. You didn't. That's the difference. He had initiative." I looked at my father. "Dad, he came to you with my work. I showed him everything 2 weeks before he walked in here. He didn't have initiative. He had access." "You shared it with him," Raymond said. "You can't share something and then be surprised when someone acts on it." I asked him for feedback. I told him I wasn't ready to move publicly. He knew it was my plan. "Marcus, I'm not going to unfund a business that's already moving. Derek is out there hiring people and signing leases and setting things up. What do you want me to do about it now?" "I want you to acknowledge what happened," I said. "I want you to acknowledge that your son took his brother's work and presented it as his own, and you gave him $80,000 for it." Raymond looked at me for a long moment. I thought he was going to say something. I thought something in him was going to crack open and the father who should have been there was going to show up. He said, "What's done is done." I drove home. I sat in my apartment for the rest of that weekend and thought about what had just happened. I had shown my father time-stamped evidence. I had shown him emails. I had shown him a paper trail going back 3 years that made the sequence of events completely clear. And he had looked at all of it and said, "What's done is done." What I understood in that weekend, what settled into me slowly and without drama, the way certain truths settle, was that my father was not confused about what had happened. He understood exactly what Derek had done. The evidence was unambiguous. He was not dismissing it because he doubted it. He was dismissing it because he had made a choice, and the choice was Derek, and the framework he used to justify that choice was initiative. Derek had moved. Derek had come to him. Derek had asked. I had not. It did not matter that the reason I had not yet come to him was that the plan was not ready. It did not matter that I had been building something real for 3 years while Derek had been waiting for an opportunity to arrive. What mattered was that Derek had walked into Raymond's living room first, with confidence and a presentation, and Raymond had responded to exactly what he had always responded to, the appearance of bold action. My brother had not built a business from initiative. He had built it from theft dressed in the costume of initiative. And my father, who understood this if he was being honest with himself, had chosen to accept the costume as the real thing. That was the thing that broke something in me that weekend. Not the money, not even the business. The conscious choice my father made to look at what was true and decide it was inconvenient. The business launched 4 months later. Derek's specialty distribution. He had incorporated under his own name, registered in Georgia. The company logo was on a delivery van that drove past my apartment complex twice a week because one of the restaurant accounts on the client list I had built was 3 blocks away from where I lived. I know because I recognized the restaurant owner's name when I saw the delivery route listed in a trade publication profile of Derek's new company. A profile in which Derek described building the business from scratch, his vision, his industry knowledge, his relationships. I read it twice. Then I closed the browser and went to work. I thought about calling the restaurant owner whose name I had seen, a chef I had built a genuine relationship with over years, whose contact information sat in my documented pipeline alongside 42 other names. I thought about what I would say to him. I thought about what it would accomplish. I thought about how it would look. The failed older brother calling to tell a restaurant owner that the distribution company now delivering his produce was built on stolen ideas. I did not call him. I have not called any of the 43 names on my pipeline list. They are running their businesses. They are getting their deliveries. The plan is working for them even if it is not working for me. That is not nothing. The family adjusted around the new reality the way families do when they have decided not to examine something. My mother was careful with me, always warm, calling often, not mentioning Derek's company more than necessary. She had a gift for managing the space between two things she loved that had moved in opposite directions. She had been practicing that gift my whole life. My aunts and uncles began mentioning Derek's success at gatherings. The cousin who used to struggle had found his footing. Raymond's investment had paid off. Was it not wonderful when families supported each other that way? These comments were not malicious. They were simply made by people who had only heard one version of the story, delivered by the people in the room, because I was not in the room to offer another version. Raymond started telling people his son had built a business from the ground up. He said it at Thanksgiving. He said it at my uncle's birthday dinner in March. He said it to a neighbor who had apparently asked what his boys were up to. Each time the story was told, it became slightly more established, not through lying, exactly, but through the accreting weight of repetition. By the time Christmas came, the story of Derek's business was simply part of what the Webb family believed about itself. I watched this from a distance through the information that filtered to me through my mother's careful phone calls. She never pushed the narrative. She also never corrected it. She was doing what she had always done, holding the family together by absorbing the things that would otherwise tear it apart, processing them privately, and presenting a manageable surface to everyone around her. I love my mother. I have always loved my mother. I know what she costs herself to be who she is in that family. I do not add to that cost by asking her to take a side she cannot afford to take. At Thanksgiving, Derek came with his girlfriend and a bottle of expensive wine. He was confident in the way that people become confident when things are going well for them. He talked about the business over dinner. Delivery volume was up. He was looking at a second van. He had landed a contract with a hotel group. The words came easily to him because they always had. I sat across the table from him and ate and listened to him describe my plan working exactly the way I had modeled it would work, under his name, in front of our father, at a table where I could see in Raymond's expression every bit of the pride and satisfaction I had always wanted him to direct at me. My mother watched me from her end of the table with the eyes she had been using on me for 36 years. The ones that say, "I see you. I see all of it. I cannot fix it. I am sorry." I nodded at her. She looked away. After dinner, I helped clear the dishes. Derek and I did not speak directly. We moved around each other in the kitchen with the careful choreography of two people managing a truth neither one of them is currently willing to say out loud at a family gathering. He handed me a serving dish. I set it in the sink. That was the extent of our communication. I drove home that night and sat in my apartment and felt the particular exhaustion of performing normalcy for 4 hours straight. Christmas came. My father's house. The whole family. Derek made a toast before dinner. He stood up with his glass, and he talked about the past year. About building something real. About taking a risk when the moment came. About what it meant to create something from nothing. About the entrepreneurial spirit. About working hard for what you want and having the courage to go after it. He said that this past year had reminded him what was possible when you stop waiting and start moving. He said he was grateful for his family's support. He looked at Raymond when he said it. The family applauded. My aunts and uncles raised their glasses. Raymond nodded from the head of the table with a pride in his eyes I had been watching my whole life and waiting for him to direct at me. Derek looked at me once during the toast, just briefly, and there was something in his expression that I still think about. Not guilt exactly, something smaller than guilt, an awareness, a flicker of acknowledgement that he kept contained and never let become anything else. He knew what he had done. I could see that he knew. He looked at me for 1 second, and he saw in my face that I knew he knew. And then he looked away and kept talking, and the moment closed. I sat at the table. I did not applaud. I did not raise my glass. I held very still and waited for the toast to end. My mother was watching me from her seat. I could see her in my peripheral vision, the careful way she was tracking both of us, managing the room the way she had always managed the room when Raymond and Derek were in it, and something was close to the surface. She had been managing rooms in this family for decades. When the meal was over, Derek and his girlfriend lingered with Raymond in the living room, talking about the business, about the new van, about a contract he was negotiating. I heard the warmth in my father's voice from across the hall, the animated, engaged, proud voice I had heard him use with Derek my whole life when Derek had something to announce. I said goodbye to my mother. I found my coat. I walked out to my car. She called the next morning. "You made it awkward," she said. Everyone noticed you didn't applaud. I know, I said. Marcus, I understand why. But the family is going to start asking questions about why things are strained between you and Derek, and I don't know what to tell them. Tell them the truth, I said. Silence. I'm not asking you to take sides, Mom. I'm not asking you to say anything to Raymond or to Derek. But I am not going to applaud my brother for stealing my life's work. I'm not going to perform gratitude for being included in a Christmas dinner while he gives a toast about his courage and initiative. I don't have that performance in me. He is your brother. I know who he is. She was quiet for a moment. What do you want from this family, Marcus? I wanted my father to say what he knows is true. I wanted my brother to acknowledge what he did. I didn't get either of those things. So now I'm just someone who knows the truth and has to live in a family where the truth doesn't matter as much as keeping things smooth. After Christmas, I put together everything. All of it. The original files with their creation dates. The emails with suppliers from years before Derek's company existed. The text messages from the week after I showed Derek the plan. Messages where he had asked follow-up questions about specific supplier contacts. Questions that made no sense unless he was already planning to use them. The dated documents. The full paper trail laid out clearly, fact by fact, in chronological order. I wrote a letter explaining all of it without anger, just event by event, and I sent it to my father with the documentation attached as a PDF. Raymond read it. I know he read it because he called me the day after I sent it. Not to discuss it, to close it. I got your email, he said. I know. Marcus, I'm not going to get in the middle of this. What's done is done. Derek has employees now. People counting on that business. I can't unwind this. I'm not asking you to unwind anything, Dad. I'm asking you to acknowledge what happened. It's complicated, he said. It isn't, I said. It's actually very simple. He took my work. You funded it. The family celebrated it. That's the whole story. All three parts of it are true and all three parts of it are documented. If you need to believe that. I don't need to believe anything. I have the files. The timestamps don't require belief. This isn't a matter of interpretation. Raymond sighed. The kind of sigh that ends a conversation rather than continuing it. I hope you can find a way to move past this, he said. For the family. For the family, I repeated. He hung up. I have not attended a family event since that Christmas. My mother calls. I take the calls. I love my mother and I know she is caught between a husband who will not look at hard truths and two sons who cannot be in the same room anymore through no fault of her own. I do not make her choose. I try to give her the part of me she can still have without requiring her to take a position in a conflict her husband has decided is settled. She told me that Derek asked about me once, through her, that he had wondered if there was a way to talk. She delivered the message carefully, neutrally, the way she has always delivered messages between the men in this family, smoothing the edges so no one has to feel the sharpness directly. I thought about that for several weeks before I told her my answer. I told her, if Derek wants to talk, he can call me directly. He does not need an intermediary. He can call me and he can say what actually happened. Not in a general way. Specifically, what he did, why he did it, and that he knows it was wrong. He does not have to repay anything financially. He does not have to dissolve the business. He does not have to go back to our father and rewrite a history that Raymond has already decided not to examine. He just has to say the true thing out loud, to me, without deflection or justification. He is not called. I have stopped organizing my expectations around whether he will. People ask me if I'm going to pursue legal action. I have thought about it. I spoke with an attorney who specializes in intellectual property and business disputes. The honest assessment was this: the documentation I have is strong, stronger than most people who come in with this type of situation. The timestamps, the supplier emails, the paper trail going back 3 years all create a credible narrative. But business plans occupy a complicated legal space. The argument that Derek heard an idea and independently developed it, even though that argument is a deliberate lie, is difficult to definitively disprove to a jury's satisfaction when the underlying market knowledge came from an industry we both had access to, even if I had developed it far more deeply. The cost of the litigation, the attorney told me, would likely run into 6 figures to do properly, and the realistic recovery, even in a favorable outcome, would be uncertain. I thanked her for her time and drove home and sat with it. The financial calculus of a lawsuit is one thing. But what I have thought about more than the money is the 12 people Derek employs now. They did not steal anything from me. They applied for a job at a distribution company and got hired because the business plan that company was built on was solid. If the company were dismantled by litigation, those 12 people would lose their jobs. I think about that. I am not going to pretend I don't. That is not the same as forgiving Derek. Those are separate things. The business is doing well by all accounts. Derek was interviewed in a regional business publication last spring. He talked about the company's growth, about the philosophy of working with local producers, about the relationships at the heart of the model. He described the company's origins as a response to a gap he had identified in the market. He had been in the industry for several years, he said, and had watched independent restaurants struggle to find the right supply partners. I read that sentence and I closed the article. He had been in logistics software sales. He had never worked in restaurant supply. He had watched independent restaurants struggle to find supply partners because I had described it to him for 2 hours at my kitchen table. The version of events that has settled into family memory is the one Derek gave them. My mother is careful with me, always warm, never forcing the issue. My aunts and uncles have largely accepted the story they were given, the one where Marcus had a good idea but didn't move on it, and Derek had the boldness to act. That version is not entirely false. It is just incomplete in a way that reorders the moral weight entirely. I say nothing at the family functions I no longer attend. My absence says something. I'm aware of that. But the alternative, being present, watching Derek receive the credit, watching my father's proud nod, costs me something I am no longer willing to pay. I am 36 years old. I am starting a new plan. Different category, different geography, different model. I am working on it alone, carefully, in the evenings, the way I always work. I am not sharing it early this time. I am not asking for feedback before the moment is right. I am going to finish it, and then I am going to take it somewhere, and I am going to build the thing I know how to build. The trust that was broken cannot be restored. Not because I am holding a grudge. I understand the difference between grief and grievance. But because the evidence of what Derek is willing to do, and of what my father is willing to accept, is now part of what I know. You cannot unknow things. You can only decide how to live with them. What I have decided is this. I will not let what happened make me smaller. I will not stop building in the careful, private, thorough way I have always built things. I will not stop trusting people altogether, though I will be more deliberate about which people and when. I will not let my father's version of events become my version of myself. Raymond wanted a son with initiative, a son who moved fast, who announced boldly, who walked into the room and demanded to be heard. He raised 2 sons. One of them performed initiative so convincingly that the performance was rewarded with $80,000. One of them spent 3 years actually building the thing, quietly and thoroughly and alone. Raymond knows which son built what. He looked at the timestamps and he chose a different story. I cannot change that. What I can change is what I build next. The original plan is still on my hard drive, timestamped, intact. Every supplier contact, every financial projection, every client name. I have not deleted it. I am not sure I ever will. It is the most thorough, carefully built thing I have ever made, and it worked exactly the way I said it would, and that fact belongs to me regardless of what anyone else has claimed. I built something real. That is still true. No one can take the truth of that. I am going to build something real again. This time, I am doing it my way, from start to finish, with no shortcuts and no early sharing and no moment of trust one will regret. I am going to do it alone, and I am going to do it right, and when it is ready, I will be the one who takes it into the room. That is the story I am writing now, not the one I was given. Have you ever trusted a family member with your most important work, only to have them take it for themselves? Have you ever watched someone receive credit and applause for something you built, at a table where everyone knew what had happened and no one said a word? Have you ever been called bitter for refusing to celebrate someone who betrayed you? Leave your story in the comments. Because the quiet workers and families, the ones who build carefully and without fanfare, deserve to be seen. And the truth does not expire just because someone decided it was inconvenient. If you believe that taking someone's decade of industry knowledge, their 3 years of documented work, and their carefully built relationships, And calling it your own initiative is not entrepreneurship. Hit that like button and subscribe. Because initiative means originating. And a man who takes his brother's blueprint to his father is not a builder. He is a thief in a good suit. Hashtag my brother stole my business plan.